layoffs, scandals, use of AI gone wrong. These days, there seems to be significant crisis looming, and we need to prepare. As my guest says, it's not a matter of if a crisis happens, but a matter of when. Hi, I'm Gabi Caro, and I'm an organizational psychology practitioner, and welcome to the Hardcore Soft Skills Podcast. In today's episode, we have Edward Segal, who is the author of the Crisis Casebook, Lessons in Crisis Management from the World's Leading Brands, and the award winning best selling Crisis Ahead 101 Ways to Prepare and Bounce Back from Disasters, Scandals, and Other Emergencies. Today, you will learn how to prepare to manage a crisis. Let's listen. All right. Wonderful. And we're here in this episode. I want to welcome you, Mr. Edward Segal, on the show.
Good to be with you today.
I'm very excited because it's a topic that is very relevant for nowadays, like today, with so many things happening at any time, actually. And I enjoy what you say on your, what you mentioned on your books and what you mentioned on your podcast as well. That it's not a matter of if a crisis happens, a matter of when the crisis happened. And we usually don't think of those things when we think that just not going to happen to us. But I want to ask you first, what made you want to focus on crisis?
Well, I was looking for a career in which it would be challenging, always interesting, and never boring, be of interest to others, would have some element of surprise, so it'd always be fresh, and I'd always look for challenges, and I wanted an opportunity to share my expertise. I had the opportunity to work on various crisis situations early in my career. And when I look back on that, uh, working full time on crisis management as part of my career, writing books, writing for Forbes.com, that really checked all the boxes. And it exceeded my expectations. When I write for Forbes, it's a wealth of opportunities, and sometimes I have to decide and prioritize which crisis I'm going to write about that day, and also the opportunity to share my expertise with the readers of the column, uh, people who read the book, and people who listen to my show. So it's worked out very well over the years.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it's never a dull day, as you mentioned, that it's always something to write about. And the aspect of crisis management, because we talk about crisis, it happened to us, we can be very reactive, but there's a whole approach that you've studied for the managing of the crisis. What does it consist of, or can you at least explain in terms of what does a good management of a crisis will look like?
Well, the first thing is to always be aware of what could go wrong. Sometimes it's a minor problem, which doesn't morph into anything more serious, and sometimes it gets to be a quite a problem and turns into a crisis. In other situations, there's absolutely no warning at all, and it's suddenly upon you, and you have to react. So it really depends what kind of crisis. Some crisis situations you can actually see coming a mile away, such as comments that are made online by customers or members of the public, and they're ignored by management, and people start to complain more and more, and it becomes a crisis. So other things that are uh, preventable are to keep an eye out for those problems and make sure you're addressing it before it becomes an issue. One of the cardinal rules of crisis management is that denial is never a good strategy. Just because you don't think a crisis will happen or hope it won't happen doesn't mean it won't happen. And unless you're fully and properly prepared for any kind of crisis, then when, not if, a crisis strikes, you're going to really be in a bad situation, which we can talk more about later in our conversation today. But that's what I want people to understand. Frankly, that's why I've written two books. about crisis management. That's why I've written more than 700 stories for Forbes.com. So that's what I'm sharing with my readers and my viewers.
Yeah, let's dive into some of those because in one of the books you describe crisis ahead 101 ways to prepare and bounce back from disaster. So I want to talk about some of those ways because you mentioned in regards of the trying to assess all the possibilities that could what things could go wrong in an organization or in a team, and also then you mentioned the example of social media there in terms of not ignoring those things in social media. Do you have any special cases of or something recent of a crisis going bad? Like absolutely, I'm sure there's many to choose from, but something along those lines of that was not handled properly in the media.
Well, there's a lot of examples of crises going bad. Twitter, now known as X, is a great example. When Elon Musk bought uh, Twitter not too long ago, he took steps that were really counter to what people wanted, had come to expect in the social media platform. He fired a lot of people who helped make the site work, and when those people left, there were a lot of problems, technical problems behind the scenes,
Hmm.
and he never did anything really, in my view, to make correct matters so the problem would go away. In fact, the more he did, the worse things got. And I think he, in the process of the crisis, uh, it really ruined the brand. It put people off from using it. People would defect and go to other platforms. So I think what he's done since he has bought X has really created crisis situations and has ruined the brand. And that's one of the many examples I talk about on Forbes.com and in my books.
Yeah, definitely one that's a memorable example of things gone wrong and the impact that it had on on that company on Twitter now X and in the recent examples about layoffs because I could think of many things of how companies are dealing with the layoffs either caused by AI or caused by other well supposedly but what are some either good or bad examples that you have noticed when it comes to managing the layoffs recently?
Well, I can't think of a really good example. Uh, every time you lay off people for whatever reason, it creates a crisis, at least in the lives of the people who are being affected. And how a company fires people can make matters worse. Some companies like to be really impersonal about firing people, and they'll do it in a Zoom call, or they'll send out a direct message or an email, or do post a video on YouTube, and that's one of the worst ways to fire people. Unfortunately, thanks to the current president of the United States and the efforts of Doge, which had been headed by Elon Musk, um, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the federal workforce were fired. They would show up to work and they would say, "Don't come back" or "Leave right now." Or they would get a cryptic message. There was no finesse to it. There was no professionalism. It was really bad all the way around. So I can't think again of a good way to fire people, but you can at least do some things right. You should be honest with them. You should give them the best reasons you can for why they're being let go. If it's possible, you should provide some support and advice um, and consultation so that they can get back on their feet. And you should do it as best you can in a personal, humane way. So people will have a sense as to what you did and why you did it, and not get a sense that they were being singled out, that they did a bad job, or they're being penalized, or in the case of the federal government, that they're being filed for no reason at all. and perhaps looked at in one way for political reasons. So that's my advice for companies and organizations that need to fire people. Think it through, be humane, be kind, be professional, and keep the people in mind who you're firing. Put yourself in their shoes. If you were going to be fired, how would you want to be treated? And I think
Exactly.
that's a good guideline going forward.
Yeah, certainly, because there's no easy way to do that. And as you mentioned, that transparency and that humane approach is very critical. In organizations right now, what's a good approach to start with preparing for managing crisis? Is it something that is done with, do they need a team to do that? What are some of the roles or first steps to prepare for those organizations?
Well, the most important thing is to have a crisis management plan in place. And as a service to your audience, I'm glad to make a complimentary copy of my crisis management template available to them that they can use as a basis or the starting point to get ready for a crisis. If they go to my website at crisiscasebook.com and look at the top of the page in the navigation bar, and they'll see a link to get a crisis management plan sent to them right away.
Thank you.
And these plans are very, very important. They should include triggers, what's going to create a crisis for the organization, who has to be notified about the crisis, uh, what are you going to do to prioritize to take action to address the crisis. I get into a lot of detail of that in the crisis management plan template. But above and beyond that, you really also need to have an excellent crisis response team in place. And the team should be in place before there's ever a crisis. Why? Because you need to give them an opportunity to practice responding to different crisis, worst case scenarios, make sure they can work well together, make sure they know the plan and can implement that plan. And unfortunately, when people work together, sometimes there's turf battles or personality differences. You need to iron all of those issues out before there's a crisis. Because the last thing you want to have when you have a crisis is have another crisis trying to respond to the crisis.
Hmm.
So make sure the plan works, test it on a regular basis, and have that crisis management team in place and make sure they work well together as well. Those are the most important things to prepare before there's a crisis.
Yeah, thank you for offering that template because that will be very helpful to help organize that the approach of the organization. Now, when do we know that we need that the company needs external help?
Well, it depends on the crisis, and also depends on how large or small the company is. Sometimes the larger the organization, the more likely it is that they might have the people on staff or the money necessary to bring in outside consultants. Smaller organizations, startup companies, they may not have the money, the skills, or the talent in house in order to be prepared for it. But as soon as you know there's a crisis, and take a quick reality check. Do we have what we need because of the nature of the crisis? Do we have it now? The skills, the expertise, the resources that we need? If not, let's reach out. Let's find the people we need. And I always recommend that people take a reality check before there's a crisis to ask themselves if we had a crisis now, could we respond to it? And if the answer is no, we couldn't, then I think they should be proactive and reach out to PR firms, law firms, other resources, perhaps even their trade association if they're a member in their industry or their profession, and ask them for their help in getting ready for a crisis. The more they're prepared, the more that they're ready, the more that they know what they can do and what they can't, the more likely it is they'll be in a better shape when a crisis strikes their organization.
Yeah, that's certainly important as they do that evaluation now, like right away of what they need, defining then when do they need external help. Because you talk about skills if the company has the skills needed. This is a podcast all about soft skills. What are some of the key skills that organizations or the individuals should have to effectively manage a crisis?
Well, I think it's really important to pay attention. Be aware of your surroundings,
Yeah.
be aware of what's happening in your industry or profession, be aware of what's happening in the real world, and that includes politics. What could happen in Washington, D.C. or anywhere else that might create a problem and be, uh, be a crisis trigger? It's important to listen. You need to be able to have open ears and open mind to what's happening and take advice, listen to criticism. Uh, I think it's also important to stay calm under pressure. If you panic when things go wrong, you run the risk of making a bad situation even worse. So, no matter what the pressure is, uh, keep calm, cool, and collected. I think it's also important that you know how to communicate. You know what to say in the right situations. You know what to say when a crisis strikes, and importantly, you know what not to say when a crisis strikes, because you don't want to make a bad situation even worse by what you say. And also, think empathy and emotional intelligence are
Hmm.
very important soft skills. And so, finally, is the ability to make a decision and stick with that decision. And all of this speaks to the need to practice and prepare before there's a crisis. It's really important to, on a regular basis, practice responding to worst case crisis scenarios using your crisis management plan and team, and make sure everything goes well. The more that you practice, the more you make sure your soft skills are in place, your team is in place, and your plan will work, the more likely it is you'll be in a better shape when a crisis strikes your company.
Very critical skills that you mentioned there about empathy, the ability to listen effectively, being aware of what's going on, and communication. Now, when it comes to communication, how do we know how to strike that balance between authenticity and also saying too much, perhaps, or being too authentic, perhaps? So, when do we, how do we assess that the company, perhaps, that level of transparency in that organization needs to have?
Well, I always recommend my clients to do a reality check and do some mock media training, which I provide for many of my clients. I put them in front of a camera. I play the role of a reporter, and I ask them on the spot, without any preparation on their part, some very pointed questions about a mock crisis for their organization. Then we go back and review the recording, and I point out to them what they did right, what they did wrong, where they could do a better job. And I touch upon these same points, authenticity, empathy, the ability to decide on the spot and make a decision and stick to it and communicate their key messages. And that's another thing I share with my clients. Sometimes my clients do well with these mock interviews with making an initial statement about a crisis, but when in my role as a reporter, I ask them for follow-up questions. I ask them follow-up questions. Sometimes they dig themselves into very deep holes.
Hmm.
So the more you practice, the more you prepare, the more you get ready for what could be some very negative pointed questions by reporters. The more likely it is that you'll be prepared. And also, I also recommend people to uh, study how others are doing in the media. Look how well other spokesperson, other CEOs appear on television, how well they're doing responding to a crisis. What can you learn from their successes and mistakes and failures? And how could you improve upon your own performance to help ensure that you're being a success and you're not repeating or making your own new failures?
Yeah, so practice definitely is critical in that case of Because, yeah, as you say, that initial statement could go great and a lot of practice, but then the ability to react to a follow-up questions, that's great. And when it comes to the part of balancing the quick responses, so when is it too quick? uh, if, let's say, the company has prepared or is preparing for to manage a crisis that just happened, how do they balance either being either too quick or being or the delayed response? Is there such a thing as take your time, or is speed what wins generally when it comes to crisis management?
Things happen so quickly today that the longer you wait to respond to a crisis, the worse things are likely going to get. And that's why you really have to be paying attention to what's happening in the world and have, at least if something happens, have what I call a holding statements to let people know you're aware of the situation, you're taking steps to address it, and you'll provide updates and more information um, as uh, as you learn more about the situation. But if you fail to respond immediately, then you are really uh, giving others the opportunity to fill the vacuum,
Mm,
and you run the risk of losing control of the narrative. And once you lose control of the narrative about a crisis, you're really going to be on the defense, and that's not ever a good place to be in a crisis. So, one good example of a company that responded appropriately, I think they were a little bit too late, but they turned it around, was the California Pizza Kitchen. They had a situation not too long ago where one of their customers was not happy with an order that was delivered to their home. They called. They called the company and complained, but they were kind of brushed off. And this person was so frustrated, they went on social media to complain. Well, then when they saw the social media posts, that's when the company doubled back, addressed the issue, and made things right. And things went so well that the Today Show actually did a story about it,
mm,
and the focus of the story was how the California Pizza Kitchen responded to the criticisms and concerns of a customer, what they did to make it right, and it wound up being a good story for the California Pizza Kitchen, and not a crisis situation.
yeah, that's very interesting. I think that case specifically was something that the customer had brought mac and cheese, and they only got the cheese but not the macaroni. And I wonder how did the company respond to that? Did they provide any what was the reward, I guess, for the customer there?
I think they provided free macaroni and cheese for quite a while. And they actually, as I recall, they launched a national promotion promoting mac and cheese. So they made, as we say, they turned lemon into lemonade, and
Absolutely.
it wound up being a good story, put the company in a very good position. They got some good advertising on it. They got some free national publicity on national television, and they have what I recommend every company do is set up a social media monitoring. There
Mm,
are services that you can use, or if you're large enough, have a large enough company, you can do it on your own, is to monitor all the social media platforms for any chatter or mentions or gripes and complaints about your company, your services. And whenever you see anything about your company, pay close attention to what's being said, monitor it. If it starts to take any traction, act accordingly. Or even if it doesn't take off, uh, contact that persons or people who are having a concern, address the issue, and solve it before it becomes a problem, or even it morphs into a crisis. So don't wait. Again, don't wait. As soon as you know something or hear something, act, because the longer you wait, the worse things are likely going to get for your business.
yeah. As you mentioned now, especially in these times, the speed of everything, and also I want to ask you about AI, artificial intelligence, because been cases of proving that something, an image shared, is it real or not? how do we manage that? Do you have some specific recommendations when it comes to the management of AI misinformation?
Well, you have to be very careful. I've been using AI uh, for lots of different reasons. And I discovered very early, as many people as others have discovered, that sometimes AI doesn't get it right. In fact, it's not unusual for AI, depending upon which platform you use, to actually make things up, or as they call it, hallucinations.
Hmm.
So I know some people who actually use one AI platform to check the work against a different AI platform. But uh, you just have to be very careful if you're writing anything. Now, there is a good use of AI, and that's when it comes to coming up with worst case crisis scenarios. I think if you ask AI the right question about a crisis for your organization and give them some details and worst case scenarios, I think it'd do a very good job of coming up with a scenario that would really test your organization to see if they are really prepared. But there are other forms of AI that are really getting causing a crisis. Deep fake, for example, misinformation or disinformation. And some of these AI platforms are so sophisticated that they can produce videos that look incredibly real
Yeah.
of well known individuals saying or doing something that they would never do and never did do, but it looks like they said or did that. So you really need to have a sense of cynicism and concern whenever you see a video. There are steps I know to find ways of identifying AI generated videos, putting watermarks on some images and photographs and videos. It's an evolving technology, but I think it's going to get, as it has been, getting a lot more sophisticated, which means we have to be a lot more aware, a lot concerned, and take steps to make sure that what we write doesn't create a crisis and what we watch or read does not lull us into a false sense of security and we fall for fake news or fake information or fake videos and fake photographs.
Yeah, especially with the development, gotta be extremely careful. I like those approaches of using AI for our benefit to prepare for a crisis as well. Great use of that. So, I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise. What's the best way for people to reach you if they have any questions?
They can go to my website of crisiscasebook.com. That's crisiscasebook.com. There's a contact form that they can reach me that way. And as I said earlier, they're free to download the complimentary crisis management template. Just go to the top of the navigation bar and you can use that plan. You can customize it for your organization. You can scale it up, scale it down, or if you have any questions, send me a message through the contact form on the website, and I'll be glad to help. I also hope you'll follow me on Forbes.com, where I'm a leadership and strategy senior contributor, and listen to my weekly podcast, The Crisis Management Minute, wherever you find podcasts.
Great. A lot of great resources that you provide, including the template that you mentioned earlier. So, thank you again so much for being here with me on the podcast.
Good to be with you. Thank you.